And you have moral support. Thank you. Is that in a PowerPoint list?
Yeah.
Are the transitions gonna be okay?
Well,
We'll see.
let's see in just a second. Yes. The answer is yes, so far as I can tell.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we do have handouts.
Hey.
OHCS.
Oh my gosh, I was gonna say, even from that you look familiar. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good.
I felt like, oh,
Here we are. Yeah.
I'm Anna. Nice to meet you.
oh yeah.
Together.
Yeah. So we're not really doing that much stuff anymore. It's so good
Yeah.
to see, you know. Like,
Yeah, no
in
kidding.
person and stuff, yeah.
I know it's been a busy time for me. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to like I heard this thing when people on Zoom. It's like, oh my god, you have legs. Like, what do you have?
I'm mostly
We're all floating heads.
like right here, but I'm based up here.
Oh yeah, see you.
We have.
Oh,
mention that.
Yeah, that's all the tip.
Phone photography. Yeah.
Wonderful. I'm also gonna put just like a pile of. I forgot my business card. Like, anybody ever uses this for your conference?
I know. I couldn't have practice.
You can tell that I've managed conferences a lot because I brought an extension cord.
I'm impressed.
I know a thing or two about. All right, everyone, I'm gonna wait maybe like 2 more minutes just to make sure that if we have anyone trickling in, they'll be able to catch the start of this presentation, but got a lot of stuff to cover today. So we'll get started in just a minute here. Oh, sure. Whatever. I think that my theater voice. And then
Mary, we've met.
And I'll project my thing out. Yeah.
And most of the people in this conference by now know about life of your that when you ask the question, they stand up and speak relatively close to the microphone.
Yeah.
And I mean, Juan Carlos today, he was gracious talking. But and but if they stand up, they actually reject.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll ask those to stand up. Okay. Yeah. No problem. No, thank you for letting me know. All right. I think we've got everybody in here, so we'll get started. Welcome to Housing Justice and Communications Training. My name is Liz Accola Meunier. I have been working in politics and advocacy communications for about 14 years now. I have been in the last 6 years or so focusing a little more specifically on digital communications as well. I have worked in DC for 5 years at an organization called American Votes that really focuses on electoral campaigns around the country. Then I came here and worked for Governor Brown's campaign as communications director in 2016. And then I moved into consulting, which is how I got into housing justice communications. In 2018, I worked on the Metro Affordable Housing Bond. And then in 2019, I was the part of early 2019 getting HERETOGETHER up and running. And I continue to work with HERETOGETHER today as well as a communications advisor in my role at Strategies 360. And I'll also introduce Anna Kemper over here. She is the communications manager for Here Together. She is a wildly talented person, super on the ball. If you have not had a chance to meet her and introduce yourself, you absolutely should. Here Together is a great resource, and a lot of that has to do with all of the great work that she's doing. So our training today is going to focus on 3 key areas, and then we'll save questions and answers for the end. Like I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of stuff to cover. So I want to make sure that we're able to get through all of that before we get to questions. We'll start out by talking about the message landscape, just kind of a real look at where we're at here and how we navigate it. To make sure that our organization is, organizations are as clear as possible and cutting through all of the other messages that are happening out there on the internet in particular. Then we're going to focus a bit on owned media. This is like your website and social media. And then we'll talk a bit about some good, strong basics to have when dealing with earned media and the press. So before I get into the message landscape, something I want to note about myself is that like I mentioned, I've worked in like campaigns in particular, so like political campaigns and bond measures. So much of my communications career and how I think and how I approach things is by picturing, I always say, like Joe Smith on the street. He may not know much about my issue that I'm talking about, but I'm trying to think of how do I catch his attention and explain something to him as concisely as possible and clearly as possible in a short amount of time, convince him that it's important, and most importantly, convince him of the right solution. So I say all of that because I want to open this by talking a little bit about an elephant in the room, which is how does the general housed public in particular view housing insecurity and homelessness in our region. First thing you might be thinking is it's not great out there. There's a lot of frustration. And certainly all of you are doing amazing work. And I know that it's hard when you're working 24/7 on these issues, and there's still people acting like nothing's being done. But I want to bring up this point because there is actually some good news around this. I've been focused my work in the Portland metro region. What we've at least seen in this region is that there is more empathy out there now for individuals experiencing homelessness or housing insecurity. Over the last, since 2016, we've had our ballot measures every other year, and ballot measures are this critical little time where a certain policy area suddenly gets this influx of funding, and there's all these ads on TV and on the internet, and all the media is talking about it, and people are talking about it with each other. And it's an opportunity to start shaping that message. So where for a long time, a lot of housing communications has been starting kind of from a ground level of breaking through stereotypes of who is impacted, and explaining some of the systemic reasons of how we got here. We're in a place, at least I can say for sure in the Portland region, where that stuff is starting to turn around. Not everybody. You're certainly going to continue to run into people who still have stereotypes and that you might need to break down with them. But generally speaking, what we're seeing in our polling over the last several years, and what we're seeing even anecdotally, even social media comments from the time I started with Here Together in 2019 to now, even then the conversation is changing. But at the same time, while there is more empathy, there is of course that rising frustration. We all know what happened after 2020 and how there's just been really hit the gas on existing issues, right? So, so then you're looking at this and probably thinking, you know, well, if housed people are feeling over it, can you imagine how it would feel if you didn't have housing? That is certainly true. But again, we're just looking at this through this perspective of what does the general public think, because that has a way of seeping into anyone that you want to work with, whether it's a donor that you're trying to get to fund something for you, or if you're working with an elected official, various partners or government agencies, it has that, it's that overbearing presence that seeps into everything. And so what we know is that with this dichotomy right now, with this frustration and also with, but still feeling empathy for individuals, we also know that frustration starts eating away at empathy over time. And so when I think about this particular landscape, I can't help but think about that girl from Willy Wonka who was like, I don't care, I want it now, I want it now. And wouldn't we all love to just snap our fingers and everything's solved? That'd be wonderful. But we're not there. And so we gotta think about, how do we think about our public communications in a way that is going to appease a landscape where there is, you know, fueled frustration in the general public. So we start by trying to explain things less. The more, if you're in a position of just trying to explain how things are, you're kind of starting on your back foot. And instead focusing the central piece of your communications around action that is happening and the results that you're getting. So in a little more specific terms, here at least in the Portland metro region, I cannot speak to the entire state because I just haven't seen a bunch of polling from around the state, but at least here in the metro region, we know that we don't need to focus on the busting stereotypes and how we got here language as much anymore. I mean, let's be honest, it's 2022. If you tell people that systems are broken, they're like, yeah, no kidding. So we can, this is a good thing in the sense that we get to the next step. We're not at square one anymore. We get to go to the next step of communications. So that's thinking about how you can showcase your results and make people feel more hopeful. So generally speaking, in communications, numbers are king. Anytime you have numbers, I want to put it in a graphic and push it out there as soon as possible. People like, it's just a great communications tool. So think about within your organization, you probably know about how many people you helped last year and about how many people you've helped so far this year. If you're looking at it and thinking, wow, we're on track to already beat how many people we helped last year, or then maybe that's something where you can take that simple number and put it out there. It might be one number, and try not to let yourself get too in the weeds of the nuances of how that number could be broken down. What matters most is having like a very clear, here's our previous number, here's our new number. Yay, it looks like progress. And that's something that a lot of people are latching on to right now. Another important piece, and I'm actually going to talk about this a little more specifically in just a bit, but any story of an individual person who has been helped is golden for several reasons. One, first of all, most importantly, you've been able to make a big change in somebody's life, and it's worth telling that story. Second, it just does so much work to tell what your organization does and why it matters in a really nice, concise package. So I think that we're in a day and age right now, especially with social media, that it seems like it's only like big, exaggerated and flashy headlines are what gets people to engage with social media content. And that's what goes viral. And that's what everybody's talking about. It's all the doom and gloom out there. But on the other side of that, people love people's stories. We're humans. We like to hear about other humans. So telling those stories in a powerful way is critical whenever you get a chance. And last but not least of this section, at least, we want to remind people that their dollars are going to work. If you have a program that is at all funded by like a bond measure or some kind of government grant, give it a shout out. Don't go into detail. Like, honestly, most people are not paying attention to all of the money that's being doled out, or they don't quite remember, like, for example, here in the metro region, the supportive housing services bond, like, not everybody knows what that is. They might remember that they voted on something in 2020, but like giving a shout out, it's like, thanks to bond funding, we were able to increase the progress of our program. Just that little shout out is also helpful. So let's talk a little bit about telling someone's individual story. This is something that we do with Here Together. We have our Happening Now newsletter that goes about every 2-3 weeks or so. And we always end it with a story of hope. And I've seen a lot of great stories coming in from our partners. I've also had a lot of great stories, but they were just like missing a lot of information in there. So I want to talk about what are the key pieces that you want to look for when you're telling a good story. First and foremost, remember that a good story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. This sounds pretty basic, but it can be easy to forget. It can be easy to jump straight to, oh, this person came to us and they needed help and we were able to help them with X, Y, and Z services, and now they're in a better place. But you kind of miss out on some of that backstory. Is anyone here familiar with the hero's journey? Any literature nerds around? Yep, I knew there'd be some lit nerds in here. So if you're not familiar, the hero's journey is just like a breakdown that any typical story about a hero usually, I want to say it's like 12 parts. It's a lot of parts. We're not going to talk about all of that. But the point is that, for example, Star Wars: A New Hope is like a classic example of this. You don't meet Luke Skywalker when he's just about to win and then he, saves the day and then we move on with our lives. No, we meet him before he knows what a Jedi is. Like, we get that real key origin story. And then he has this call to action when he sees that Princess Leia needs help. And then he doesn't go straight to saving the day. He kind of gets involved and has some victories, but then he has some setbacks. And then there's a part where he just totally doubts himself and he thinks he can't do it anymore. But then he comes back and that's when he saves the day. And that's what makes a compelling story. So when we are telling a person's individual story, they are our hero. And you want to give people a reason to root for them. So that's why we want to break it down into I've been telling these stories enough times that I realized it's pretty much 4 key parts that you want to look for. Always start with a person's backstory, their origin story. Where are they coming from? And who are they just as a person? I love to include any type of relatable details. If you're, for here in the Portland region, since we are keeping it pretty local, we can get specific about neighborhoods. Like they worked at an ice cream shop on Sandy and went to Madison High School. They worked at, Smith's Auto Shop or something like that. So at some of those details. This is always tricky too, because there's the reality that a lot of folks that we're helping have been through trauma, and you don't want to air anybody's dirty laundry or make them feel uncomfortable putting their story out there. So this is where you want to give just enough high level detail to give an idea of how they ended up without secure housing. But you don't have to go into deep detail. It might be there were some issues, they dealt with problems at home and needed to leave. It can be as simple as that. But giving some of that, even that little bit of detail, problems at home and needed to leave, there are enough people out there who have either experienced that themselves or know somebody who had that experience, and that in itself draws you in and it's a little more compelling. The next piece of the story that you want to tell is the turning point. What was that moment where things went from looking dire and like they weren't going to get better to all of a sudden there's hope and they're on track to a better place? Perhaps it was the moment that they just, you know, finally felt ready to accept help. Oftentimes it's a person, someone that they knew. It could be a service worker that was connecting with them. Maybe they just finally caught a break. Maybe they'd been trying time and time again to find a place to get housing and been sleeping in their car, and finally they caught a break. That's an exciting piece of the story. So make sure that you capture that. And the next part is the journey to change. And this is just like I was talking about Luke Skywalker. He didn't have a call to action and went straight to success. You know, there's those early days for a person. What were those early days like when they started on their path to making change? Did they have some setbacks? Did they doubt themselves? They might have had some days where they felt like, you know, it's not worth getting up and being a part of this program because I'm not worth it. And then somebody came to them and talked to them about, no, you deserve this. You deserve a more stable housed life. You deserve the kind of support that we have in our community. And that's what helped bring them around and keep them going and moving forward. And now today they're in a better place. Like that's an important and compelling piece. Nobody just gets it right on the first try. I mean, some people do and they're wonderful, but that's never been me. So anyway, don't miss that piece of their story. And then last but not least, you want to wrap it up by saying, how are they doing today? And how are they seeing their future? In our Happening Now newsletter, we featured a story that has stuck with me because there was a man who was a gardener, and I love gardening, and he just was, I don't remember the partner who submitted this story, but it was just, they did such a good job of capturing those little details when they sent it over, of him talking about, you know, now he has this peaceful little porch where he can look over his plants and hear the birds. And he's talking about the vegetable garden he wants to plant in the future. And it was just so beautiful. I felt so connected to him. And I just wanted to go help him with his garden. Like, yes, let's plant those carrots. So anyway, this is if you're able to, when you are telling somebody's story, think about these 4 parts. And if you're hitting each one of them, it takes some time and practice, but it also will help you, prompt you with the type of questions you want to ask that person, and make sure that you're getting the whole piece. Okay, so now we're going to talk a bit about owned media. And this is, I feel like this is not a super common term that you'll hear, owned media. It's just a broad way of capturing your website, your social media, certainly any of your online properties, but it also includes things like any videos or graphics that your team is creating, any op-eds and letters that you send out, or letters to the editor. I have blast emails and text messages, but also mailers would be included in here. This is the places where you have 100% control over that message. No one else is messing with your message. So before I move on to this, I have to ask, how many of you are have been in the position where you're like, I got to get a Facebook post up, and all you can think is, this is the lowest priority on my list. I've got way more stuff to do. Yeah, no, we've all been there. Like, I feel that way, and I have to do it for a living. I'm just like, oh God, can I get another Facebook post up? But I am hoping that I can help convince you that that Facebook post can be an important piece of your story. Reason number 1, you need to be able to tell the story of who you are and why your work matters in your own words. Not only should you have that already up on your website, but by using platforms like social media, it's almost like a micro blog where you get to regularly build on your own story of the work that's happening, the new things that you can expect. You're basically establishing this nice long track record of the work that you've done over time. And that's also important because it helps you look more professional. How many of you here have had to, like, say, you needed to get your car fixed and you're looking for a service, or you're looking for a restaurant or somebody, a plumber to come fix your sink. And so you're looking for a business and you go to their website and it's like kind of having a hard time finding the information you need. It's kind of clunky and you're just kind of like, I don't know. And so you decide, I'm not going to work with that business. We all do it constantly, and people are doing it to you online. When they are going to your website, it is there so often. If you hear of a new organization, you're going to Google it. And then when you get to their that website, so much is communicated to us subconsciously at that point that it's you don't even realize that you're doing it. So if someone is coming to you looking for services, if someone's interested in volunteering, if someone wants to make a donation, they're going to go to your website. And if they get kind of like a not great impression, or if they go to your social media and you haven't posted in like 3 years, it's not a good, it doesn't give people a lot of confidence in like, oh yeah, they're super, professional and out there and doing all this great work that they say that they're doing. It looks like they haven't done that work since 2017, according to this last post, So in addition to all of that, I mentioned, you're establishing your track record, you're making yourself look professional, but you're also building your own narrative before someone can step in and build that narrative for you. If there is a void in today's day and age, it will be filled by someone. It could be a reporter who's, decides to define your organization as something that is not at all the word choice that you would use. You might have like a former employee who's on, has a viral post about the work that they did there, or someone else that you helped. They could post something on social as well. So when you take the time to like really make sure your online properties are in good shape and you have like at least a fairly regular posting on social media, you're building this track record so that if you need to respond to those situations, you already kind of look like you're starting in a good place. You have like this solid foundation of like, no, for a long time, we've been doing this work, things like that. Hopefully you're not in that situation. It's just, I'm always thinking about the worst case scenarios. The last reason, if I have not convinced you with these other 3 reasons that you need to care about your website and your social media, it's so important for donors because they're doing the exact same thing where they're going to your website and they're thinking about whether or not they want to make a donation. Any type of funder, they're no different. And so remember, if that's the only audience that you're caring about to make sure your work can continue, this is your reason. So I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, I have a small team, and there's a reason why those Facebook posts feel like the least important thing. It's hard to know where to focus your energy. I have communications has always been a part of my work, but it's also so often been in addition to some other job. I actually, when I was in DC, ran a conference about this size on top of doing my regular day job. It's a lot. So if you can only focus on like a few things, here's what I would recommend. Make sure your website is solid and quality. It doesn't have to be fancy, just a good quality website. That means that it's easy to read, you can find the information, it loads well on your phone, all of that stuff. I'll talk in a minute about like a website checklist that you can go back and take a look at your site and see if it matches. Next, pick about 2 to 3 social media channels. I think it's easy to hear about a new social media channel like TikTok and think, oh my gosh, now we have to be on TikTok. And the level for what is a good social media presence for a brand or organization, the standard's so high right now that it's just silly. You don't have to be like these big organizations that have like 15 people working on their communications team and they just generate content all day, you'll never compete with that. That's fine. But you should pick like 2 to 3 that you're going to keep up with. And we'll talk in a minute about which ones you should probably be leaning toward. Next, blast emails. Just keep your email list alive. 2 to 3 emails a month can sound like a lot, but you guys are like super busy, but it's a good way to just make sure that you're communicating. If you could, ideally, you'd be sending out an email like every week or twice a week or something like that if you had a lot of stuff going on. But realistically, just enough to like keep things alive on your list, making sure people know you're working and if they've made a donation, their dollars are going to work, all of that kind of stuff. And then if you have a place on your website for blogs, that's awesome. Having an occasional blog post, maybe like once a month, even if all you can do is every other month, great. And then whenever you get an opportunity to, op-eds are awesome. Let's see. So let's talk a little bit about your website. I mentioned like a website checklist. Hopefully your website does not look like the Web King here. That's a perfect example of when you go to a website and you don't quite trust it. True story. We were looking at like, why was I looking at dog breeders? I just found like 3 in a row where it looked like their website was built in 2003. And it was like, are they even working anymore? It was crazy. Anyway, so if you haven't taken a good look at your website in a while, I encourage you to do it just like once a year, every other year, just like a full run through of, are we checking the boxes? Make sure that your website has a generally attractive or easy to read layout. I hate using the word clean because I feel like it's the most nondescript design word there is out there, but basically is loading quickly on your site and you can easily read it and it's clean. It looks attractive enough, that kind of stuff. Next, you want to make sure it's going to be easy to navigate both on your desktops and especially mobile phones. It is astonishing how much traffic comes from mobile phones these days. Maybe it's not, because I think we all do it all day if you have a smartphone. But like, I'm talking at least 50%, if not higher, people are coming to your website from their phones. And honestly, especially if you're looking at people that you're trying to serve who have lower incomes, they might not have a full laptop. They probably do most of their internet research on their phone. So make sure that stuff. Oh, and then of course, check all of your buttons, all of your forms, and all of your menus. You can navigate and get around there pretty well. Make sure that any key information like how to volunteer, how to donate, how to get a hold of us, all of that stuff is easy to find and available. But this bothers me because this happens a lot. A website where you can submit like a contact form. This is so common, a contact form embedded into your site. But then where does that email go? If you don't know the answer to that, figure it out. Find out where it's going. Make sure it is going somewhere, and that there is someone who is awake and paying attention on the other end so that they can respond if needed. 3 more things real quick. Make sure you have clear evergreen content. I just recently worked with a wonderful client, but when I got to their about page on their website, there was something about like, and this fall we added blah, blah, blah. And that was 3 years ago. Your about page should be timeless. Make sure that you're not using for things like this fall or next year or something like that. Just keep it evergreen. Make sure there's a place to post news and updates. This is often like a blog section. It might be like on the back end of your website labeled like a blog. You just never know when you're going to be like, oh, we wish that we could post this thing up on our website and make it an easy resource for other people to access. And that's like the perfect place to just have that exist. And last, make sure all of your links to your offsite pages are there, such as like your social media accounts or like an offsite donation page. If you have like a Medium blog for some reason, that's what we have with Here Together. We have that stuff linked. If you have like a Google form that you regularly use, make sure that that stuff is all linked. It's just good hygiene to make sure you got it all taken care of on your site. Do we have anyone from Join here by chance? Oh, no kidding. I love Join's website. I think that it is a really great example of a website that's checking all the boxes that we've got here right now. Plus on top, not only are they checking all the boxes, but they do have like a really nice place for personal stories. So good work to your former team. And I also love that photo. It's really, it's like, if you're going to have a good like banner image, like this is a good one because you've got at least one person who's looking directly at the screen. Even on mobile, it still shows up okay because sometimes you'll have like buttons. This is, again, you got to check your mobile site. Buttons will like go over people's faces and stuff like that. But this one is really perfect. It's timeless. I love it. So good job, guys. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about social media. In the past, I have done like 3-hour deep dive trainings just on social media. So I am going to really try to truncate myself here because we don't have a ton of time. And I know we want to talk a bit about earned media. But I can't talk about social media without making this very important point about which platforms people are using. Now, you don't post stuff on, we're talking about posting stuff on social media. So you have this like running conversation about your story and the work that you do. But there's also the people on the other end of it. You want to be thinking about what is the purpose of me putting this out there? And am I reaching the type of people that I hope I'm reaching? If your goal is to be very, very readily accessible to anyone who might need help, are you on the platforms where you're more likely to find your audience? So this data, in all the years I've been doing trainings, I have closely tracked this data from Pew Research. They do this like either every year or every other year, kind of give or take, whenever, it kind of seems like whenever the team just gets around to it. Since 2012, just taking a survey of adults in the United States and asking them, do you use any of these social media platforms? And it's like, way more than 80% of all US adults use some kind of social media platform. And this is across ages, like everybody's online now. But the most popular platforms might surprise you a bit. I'm gonna give you the first one real quick. This is YouTube, because I don't think you're gonna think YouTube as a social media platform. We all use it. We all just, pick up a video, whatever, from time to time. So anyone wanna guess what this next one is at 69%? You could just shout it out. Facebook. Yep. I know I would, if I was a betting woman, I would put money on several people in this room having deleted their Facebook account. And they're like, oh, never doing Facebook again. So everybody left Facebook. Remember when everybody left Facebook? They didn't. 69% of US adults are still on Facebook. Now in 2016, you can see if you're following that line, it plateaued a bit. So, it's not like there was no impact. People aren't like rushing to get on there, but they're all there. And you might be thinking it's all old people, right? I don't have that data up here, but it's actually skews really young still. You'd be surprised. I think it's still, honestly, it might just be young people checking in on like, hey, what's mom and grandma up to? But they still have Facebook. That's the point, is they're still seeing stuff on there. Yes, exactly. So does anyone want to just shout out a guess for the next one? Instagram, nailed it. That's the fastest growing platform of at least since they've been tracking it, but I think statistically it has been the fastest growing of all platforms, although TikTok is really making a run for it these days. Anyone want to guess number 3? Snapchat? That's not a bad guess. Not Twitter, it's Pinterest. whole bunch of people on Pinterest. And what's really interesting too is when you get into rural communities, like I did not include this demographic breakdown because I would be talking about it for like an hour and you guys would leave. But Pinterest is the only platform that seems to be a little more popular like in rural areas compared to like urban and suburban. Fun fact, I just thought it was interesting. Also, no surprise, it's a whole bunch of ladies on Pinterest. Oh yeah, exactly. Oh, it's so handy, right? I love Pinterest. All right, next is LinkedIn at 28%. This has been growing a lot more. Well, I guess looking at the line, I might be making that up. No, I mean, it's been a gradual increase, but it still continues to grow. I will note LinkedIn is really great for like trying to reach your other people that want to talk about wonky things in your industry and use all of the acronyms. And, you know, you can really go to town on LinkedIn and stay within your industry. I keep mentioning about like different demographic breakdowns. I will make a note that in the Pew Research data, it does break down race by white, Black, and Latinx, but it does not, unfortunately, have any other races mentioned in there. So we don't, at least the data that I have right now, does not include like Indigenous and Asian. So just giving you a FYI, if I'm talking a little bit about those demographics, I unfortunately only have white, Black, and Latinx. So anyway, I'm also bringing that up with LinkedIn because it's one of the platforms that noticeably is about even among white and Black adults, but much less popular with Latinx adults. Don't know why. Yeah, Facebook. Yeah. Also, WhatsApp is huge among the Latinx community and like around the world, really, and in Asian communities, I know as well. So next is Snapchat. And anyone in here surprised we haven't gotten to Twitter yet? Yeah? Any big Twitter users in here by chance? I am. And if you were watching the news, you would think that Twitter is the end all be all because like everything's about Twitter. And then like Donald Trump was on Twitter, but now he's not. And like the press are obsessed with Twitter. And it is behind Snapchat. That is so embarrassing, guys. Here it is, 23%. And it's like not growing. It actually went backwards and then kind of like had a slight comeback. Like I said, I've been tracking this data for a long time. I laughed so hard when I saw how much Elon Musk wanted to buy Twitter for. I was like the epitome of someone who believes that Twitter is the universe. And he was like going to put a whole bunch of money on it. I was like, that is hilarious. There's no way it's worth that much. I'm not a rich person, but if I had to guess, it's probably not worth that much. So it's actually tied with WhatsApp, and I would not be at all surprised if WhatsApp continues to grow. It is a worldwide, it's really just a matter of time here in the United States, I think, before it really takes off. And then next is TikTok. This is actually 2021 was the first year that they included it in the survey, and it's already at 21%. The thing about TikTok is that they, because the videos are exportable and they show up on all of the other social media platforms, it continues to draw more people in. I would not be at all surprised if like the next time we take this survey, if TikTok is like way further up here. It'll probably pass Twitter. I mean, everybody's passing Twitter at this point. Did you have a clarifying question? You can export the videos and then post those separately, but it has that TikTok logo on it. And that's where a lot of people are like, oh, what's this TikTok thing? And you can make, yeah, you can make the videos all, and they have like all of these editing tools too. And that's why a lot of people like to use it. And then the last two real quick, we have Reddit and Nextdoor down at 13%. I know. I'm just kind of waiting for Nextdoor to get eaten up by another platform. It feels, that's how I feel about it. I don't know if that's what's going to happen, but anyway. Yes, and I guess I shouldn't breeze over that because I'm sure sure many of you have dealt with Nextdoor and the honestly, there's a lot of racist people on Nextdoor. It's disgusting, and Nextdoor is not doing anything, to my knowledge, to moderate that, and that's not okay. And I guess maybe I'm just hoping that it gets eaten up by another platform so that we don't have to deal with it anymore. Not that that solves the problem, but they need to do a lot of work there. They have been trying to branch out and try to grow as a platform. I have been approached at different conferences I've been to of like, do you want to buy ads on Nextdoor? And I was like, no, not really. I don't really want to talk to those people. Exactly. And well, here's what I'm always looking at. It's at 13%. That does not at all invalidate the need to moderate those conversations, just to say, oh, it's just, like a small group of people. That does not invalidate that at all. I'm going to be honest, guys, I don't know what to do about Nextdoor other than making sure that if you are on Nextdoor, responding to people who are getting things wrong, who are saying something that's not, there's so little oversight happening from Nextdoor itself that the best thing we can do right now is hope that this thing dies out. And by the looks of it, in looking at how they've been trying to branch into more areas and not being very successful in that way, they also just have not a great reputation. And among a lot of digital managers as well, it's kind of this thing where of other people that I know that are in the progressive advocacy space and working on digital media, a lot of folks are like, just go on there and post yourself and just do what you can. But otherwise, this is a platform that we're really hoping will have to disintegrate at some point. Oh, certainly. Yeah, it's yeah, that is actually a very fair point. I used it for like the first time in like a year and a half the other day because there was a lot of noise in my neighborhood. I was wondering what was happening. And I got on there, I was like, man, what is all this stuff from San Francisco? Like, I have so much San Francisco content in my feed. I've never been to San Francisco, so I don't understand it. Well, actually, I'm about to get into that a little bit. So let's talk about which platforms you should be thinking about using for your organization, just being realistic. If you got off of Facebook, you might want to go back to it. Just because that's like the foundational piece. If people are on social media full stop, usually it's like Facebook and then like some other pieces that they choose. You're just have a lot more flexibility there where you can post links and you can get really good photos as well. But if you're trying to reach like a really broad population, Facebook is going to be the like common ground for most people on social media. Next is going to be Instagram because it's shooting right up there and it's showing no signs of slowing down. Even though people are getting off of Facebook, they're like, oh, fine, we own Instagram. That's fine. Get on Instagram. So generally speaking, like over the years, it's really like it started off, it was like pretty much it's people under 30 on Instagram. Then it's like, oh, well, I guess maybe, people under 40 or so. It's definitely a whole lot of people under 50, but now even the age bracket between 50 and 65 is at least like 30%, which is pretty high. So it's almost like I put under 50 because I felt more confident saying that, but it might be a little more like under 65 at this point. It is, like I said, it's everybody and it's growing fast. Also, good to know if you are trying to reach more Black and Latinx communities, you're going to have, among the adults that were surveyed, it was more popularly used among Black and Latinx communities than white communities, like kind of substantially more popular. It's pretty much like Facebook's the #1 and then Instagram's #2. And then if you're going to add another platform, although I have not been very kind to Twitter during this presentation, it is where the press is. And you can use that to your advantage. So if you have time to manage your Facebook and Instagram, the next place where I'd consider is Twitter, in thinking about it as a place to be, this is your current events space. This is your talking in the press. This is talking to advocates and wonks. So for Here Together, Anna and I have worked together on this a lot of like, instead of doing a press release, we'll just do a Twitter thread. And especially as we've been responding to people for Portland a lot, like this has been a good space. Like we had a good tweet that went viral where we were like subtweeting people for Portland and correcting them on something. They're like, oh, where's all the shelter beds? And we're like, oh, thank you for asking. Here's all the new shelter beds that were just put up in this year. Here's the locations of all of them. Thanks for posing this question, guys. And you can get a lot of press pickup from stuff like that. Several years ago, I was able to have some work with a client where they were responding to a current event, and we didn't do a press release at all. We just did a Twitter thread. The Oregonian not only picked it up without even contacting us, they wrote a story. It's like 2 paragraphs, embedded our first tweet, another paragraph, and then just like embedded 5 more of our tweets. It was the like most amazing free press I've ever seen. I've just noticed this about the Oregonian. They're sitting on Twitter and they're just like writing articles based on what they say. That's kind of amazing. Next, if you're going to go into another space, I would consider LinkedIn. Again, if you're trying to reach the Latinx community, at least specifically for that community, LinkedIn isn't going to be as prominent of a space to reach them. I will note, this is true of actually both Twitter, but especially LinkedIn. Demographically, you're going to reach people with higher education, higher incomes. High income on their scale is 75,000 plus a year for salary, and then like a minimum bachelor's degree for higher education. So it's like it skews that way on Twitter, but then it really skews that way on LinkedIn. And then on TikTok, I mean, if you're trying to if you're nailing it on these 4 platforms and you've got time for one more, TikTok is rising in popularity, but the reason if you are trying to reach young people, maybe that would be higher on your list, right? Every organization is different, but it does have all of those video editing tools. If you are trying to tell somebody's story, TikTok's going to give you a lot of cool and interesting ways that you can film somebody's story and tell their story in a compelling way. And then again, you can export it and put it on your other platforms. So, so that's why I would consider it for the future, but not if you don't have a ton of time. So I'll go through these pretty quickly because I want to make sure that we move on to earned media. But so for the type of content you want to post, going back to the first part of this presentation, talking about stories of success, personal stories, and any type of data pointing to work being done out in the community. Get that stuff up on Facebook and Instagram. I hope you guys are using Canva. That's your free platform for making little graphics. It's a great way to get all those numbers out there in a way that's way less boring than just looking at a number. And of course, any good news stories, if you get an op-ed published or you just see a good news story out there that you want to make sure everybody sees, be keeping up with that stuff on Facebook and Instagram for sure. Look for any opportunity to take cell phone videos. I've been talking a little bit about TikTok already. And I'll also note We have a handout here that has tips from a really awesome professional videographer and photographer that we work with. He has done a training with our Here Together team in the past on how to take good cell phone videos, and he did a brain dump on paper for you to take with you here. But I think a lot of folks will get hung up on the video piece of it, like, oh, we have to hire someone and have it all produced. No, not people will sit and watch a vertical video all day. There were a lot of people projecting that was not going to be the case, like maybe 8 years ago or something like that. And it's actually kind of funny. Everybody loves vertical video, so don't miss those moments. And then on Twitter, I've talked a little bit already about like doing those threads. That's really an important way that you can get yourself into the news. So quick shout out to our friends at Street Roots, because I feel like when it comes to telling someone's personal story, they've done an amazing job. They have this running series of people holding up their keys when they finally get into affordable housing. Consistently, some of their higher performing posts. I know I'm stalking them a little because I'm always like, I love because they're a news source, they always have stuff to post on like all the social media accounts. Like they're constantly generating content. So that's really helpful for them in building their social media brand. But consistently, these posts of people holding up their keys always performs really well. This one on the right was recently posted, and I'm sure if I went back and checked it, probably already be over 200. Like it just always continues to get a ton of likes. So let's talk a little bit about earned media, and then we'll get to the full Q&A period, I promise. So earned media, when we're talking about this, we're talking about press, of course. Raise your hands if talking to press makes you feel like really anxious. Yep, that's what I thought. Also raise your hand if you ever worked at an organization, especially early in your career, where somebody was like, if you ever see a reporter, don't say a word to them. You don't say anything, like you gotta send them some, yeah. So unfortunately, on behalf of PR people, I want to apologize because I feel like we've scared the crap out of people when it comes to reporters. And then you get further in your career and then you have to be the person to talk to them. And it's just like, oh my God, what do I say? So the key to really trying to break through that is to humanize the person that you're talking to. You are doing your job and they are doing their job. And so we want to build a good relationship with them in a way that's understanding of what they are looking for, because they're not trying to undermine you. I promise. The vast majority of them are not like out here to like, you know, take down an organization, especially if you're doing good work in the community. That would be really weird. So let's just talk a little bit about how to build a good relationship. First and foremost, with a reporter, and really anybody you want to build a good relationship with professionally, make sure that you're responsive. If you go dark, they're going to be like, you know, well, they're not reliable. I can't go to them. They're looking for a good, reliable source. And if you can say, hey, I saw your mess, you know, if you get an email, hey, I saw your message, I'll get back to you in a bit. That in itself is like, oh, they're awake, they're on the other side. If they call and leave you a message, give them a call back within like, you know, 24 hours at least, if not sooner, if you can, just to let them know that, yeah, I'm here. I'll see if I can get you something. That will set you on a wonderful path. Next, respect their deadlines and their time. Today, reporters don't have the kind of deadline-driven job that they used to be when they, you know, had to get things to the press, to print in the paper. Remember papers? Those were fun. They do have more flexibility because things are just posted online. They can even go back and revise them in the way that they used to not be able to. But certainly, if there is some like kind of breaking news story and you happen to be involved, they're going to be on a much tighter deadline. So if you can be respectful of that deadline, if the deadline is impossible, like there's always going to be sticky situations, but doing your best and letting them know, being responsive, I'm awake, I'm doing my best to get back to you, that type of stuff, that's going to do wonders for you. And also when you are speaking to them about an issue, especially if it's like kind of heavy and in the weeds, try to avoid a ton of jargon and a lot of acronyms. This is especially true if you're working with a reporter who you're like not sure how much they know about a policy area, especially your policy area. There are some reporters like Alex at the Mercury, like she's been like in the weeds on this for a while. So like you can talk a little more jargon with her, but other reporters, like a lot of TV news reporters, especially the young ones, like right out of school, like, ooh, let's break this down. Let's get a feel for what you guys know. So anyway, the point is that you want to stay away from jargon and acronyms as much as you can in that case. When you are working with a reporter, remember that they have to actually have words on the page or audio or video or whatever. They need content in order to make content, right? So make sure you're, as much as possible, giving them a quote on the record that they can use, giving them useful information they can use in their story. If you are working with them a lot, like on background or off the record, you're just kind of like out of nervousness, being like, no, don't post that, you're not being helpful to them. So give them something they can work with. And then last but not least, once again, reporters are people too. If you take time to get to know them just as another professional, like you would any other partner, just keep that in mind. Like they are good people. They're not out to undermine you, and you might learn something new from them. I don't know. So just to be really clear on this quick media terminology, I think a lot of folks think there's on the record and off the record, but there is something in the middle called on background. On the record, of course, means anything you say can be quoted and attributed to you. Most of your conversations should be in this green area. Next is on background. This one you might go in and out of a little fluidly. The other day I was talking to a national reporter and just kind of fluidly in my conversation being like, oh, you're based in New York. I don't know if you know that Oregon's an all mail ballot state, and we have these voter pamphlet statements that go out to everybody, and they're very important. So I had to kind of like break that down for her a little bit just while I was talking on the record. She understands she's not going to publish that. Like, she's reasonable, or doesn't need to. It would make the story boring. You can also just like deliberately go on background them. This is an important tool for you if you're working in a policy area. Like, your job better than anyone. You know this issue better than anyone. So you can just say, can we go on background for a minute? I just want to make sure that you have some context. They'll almost always be like, yeah, sure, that's great. Make sure that they agree to it. That's really the key part, so that they know that I'm giving you some information. They may use some of that information. They may not attribute it to you. It kind of depends on that situation. I'm trying to keep this pretty one-on-one without getting into the weeds. But anyway, just know that they have to agree. And the last part, and this is especially important for the agreement piece, is off the record. Use this extremely rarely. This is like a tool that communications professionals will use to like maybe drop in a tip or do a leak or something if they want reporters to like get an idea of what's going on and where they should sniff around for a story. And what's really important here is that because they cannot use any of the information you're giving them from or a quote from you, and I mean information, if they find that information elsewhere, usually you would be pointing them in a direction for where they can get that information elsewhere and cite that information elsewhere. Just know you're giving them stuff that they can't use, and that's not really beneficial to your relationship with the reporter. So use it, but use it smartly and use it rarely. So few quick steps. Reporter calls or emails you, now what? So first of all, don't feel pressured to respond off the cuff. Once in a while, you will have the type of reporter that will like want to catch you off guard and make you give a quote, but you have every right to say, oh no, let's take this back a minute. Why don't you tell me a little bit about what's going on here? First of all, you want to ask, what's your deadline? What is your story about? Or like, what's your angle? What kind of questions are you asking us? You know, get them back to that beginning. So, okay, now that I know all of that, now, you know, what's the question that you have for us? And if it's not the type of question that you feel like I can just respond now that I've slowed down this conversation, you'll want to say, you know, oh, I might need a little more time to get you a response. Like I mentioned before, if you feel like this is getting a little bit like a topic that's in the weeds and you're like, oh, you shouldn't be like writing about this without knowing X, Y, or Z, then you might want to ask a few more detailed questions, maybe get an idea of who else they're talking to. So you can kind of like get a picture in your head of like, oh yeah, you know what you're talking about and you've got that background, so I can talk about this a little more, you know, you can form a little bit of a better quote in that case. So few best practices for when you're getting or writing a quote, and I cannot emphasize this enough, get right to the point. We all have so much that we want to say, and I'm sure everything that you want to say is important. I have so much to say too, and boiling it down and really getting to the point and getting to a point right away, and not just like burying it later in your email or your quote or whatever. It is so important because they are, and this actually gets to my next point, which is keeping it short. Long quotes are going to be cut down. What is the thing that you want to make sure that they get? That's why you want to get to the point. And if you have a really long press release, and especially if you've buried the lead, they might not even read it at all. I'll share this quick story with Anna when she first came on board. It was like in the early days of us working together. She hadn't actually done like a full-on press release before. And so she's like, oh, can I, you know, I want to take a crack at this. Can I do that and send it over to you for review? Sounds good. So she sends me a press release. And the first reaction I have is, Anna's a great writer. I mean, she's a very talented writer. And the next thing I noticed was, if I had copy and pasted these paragraphs in exactly the opposite order that she gave me, that would actually be a press release because she had somehow had the point at the bottom paragraph. If you are a heavy book reader, and I know Anna is, we've gone into detail about this conversation. It's really funny. It's like I went to journalism school and they grill you on like, get to the point. And like, I got points marked off because I, you know, could have said it in 2 words, but instead I said it in 4. You know, that kind of stuff. Like, so I've been trained in this way. But if you like really love reading books, you can get to the point of a story on the last page if you want, because it's all about the journey along the way, right? And you're reading. Nobody's feeling that way about your press release. So start with the point and then build on the point after that. And then don't go on too long. Next, be sure to convey your values. When we are training candidates that are running for office to be ready for debate, we will do like a Q&A with them where you ask them a question that would normally get you to like give a more practical response, but instead we say only respond with your values. So here's an example. We've got a candidate who is running to be mayor of Smallville. And Smallville has been overrun with this issue of just clown brigades everywhere. They've got big floppy shoes and their little, you know, flowers with the water squirting at people. So we are asking our candidate, okay, so if candidate X, if you are mayor of Smallville, what are you going to do about these clown brigades? And the candidate should respond with, the people and families of Smallville have every right to be safe from clowns in their home. And then you give the rest of your answer. So when you're thinking about how you respond to something, build a quote, start with, here's my value. Here's what's important. What's important is that we are helping people find safe, stable housing. and then move on to answering the more practical pieces of that question. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I will get these points up for you and talk just a little bit about making sure that you have an organization that is media ready. I want to make sure that I've saved enough time for Q&A, so I don't want to spend too much time on this, but make sure that you have like 1 to 2 official spokespeople. If you don't already have those people figured out, make sure you do. And make sure you have a clear sign-off protocol, and do not do more than 3 people if you don't have to. Like, and I mean, really narrow it down, because there have been so many times where I've worked with a client and we're like trying to respond to someone. We've got like 30 minutes to get back to the reporter to meet their deadline. And there's like 15 people that have to sign off, and they all have an opinion. And it's not that their opinions are not important. It's just that we have 30 minutes and we really got to get this turned around. So if everybody can agree to a point, the 3 best people, no more than 3 best people who we're going to trust are going to make the right call, make that your procedure so you can get that quote out the door. Another piece I have in here is drafting a holding statement. This is both fun and terrifying of an exercise, but it's basically setting up a template like press release or statement. And you need to think of like all the scenarios in your head of like, let's say something terrible happened. There was this breaking news story and we're being asked for a response and we just like don't have our stuff together yet. And we just need to buy ourselves some time. So you have this like template that's ready to go. And you want to think of all kinds of scenarios, like our building blew up. There was, an asteroid that came and somehow only hit our facilities. It can be silly stuff like that, but we're like being real, like, what if there was like a murder at our place? What if there was a con artist that was scamming all of the people that we were helping? So we employed somehow like something, just think of all those horrible situations and kind of like having that time to all come together and be like, what would we do? Because then when that way less terrible situation comes up, it certainly will get you to a place where you're thinking like, okay, well, at least it's not this other stuff that we've planned for, but we do have this template ready to go that will probably be pretty similar no matter what the situation. It's always going to open with something about, we are aware of the situation and we are working to get more information at this time. Our hearts go out to the victims and their families. In the meantime, we are working with the proper authorities and we'll put out a statement where we have more information on what's going on, something like that. Those statements are pretty standard, but when you have something like that for your organization ready to go, and maybe like a couple of them, it gives you a little bit of peace knowing that you're ready for something to happen. And then a few of these real quickly. When you are pitching a story, make sure that you are looking for a good newsworthy angle. Newsworthy means it relates to something that's either currently going on in the news or just what's going on in your community. And if you can, the more you can tie it to that stuff, the better, especially if you can talk about like, this is helping with local businesses, or this is helping to, clean up litter in this area or something like, the reporters latch on to that stuff. Make sure that you take time to reach out to reporters who are covering your topic specifically. And you don't want to just send a whole bunch of press releases out to, the sports reporter if they're not going to cover your topic. If you get a chance, like try to get coffee with them in advance. Be like, hey, can we just like have a like background or off the record conversation, just kind of get to know you and talk to you a little bit about what we're up to. They're open to that. Again, they're looking for reliable sources and you're giving them a good signal there. So doing that in advance will certainly help you with your story in the future. Consider what the report actually needs to generate a story. Again, if they're thinking like footage, do you have like an event where a reporter will want to show up at I was just thinking about a media training. We did a much more in-depth media training with HERETOGETHER, and our reporter from OPB was saying, she's like, I'm looking to be like dropped into a scene because she has to get audio, right? So if you're holding an event, this is a perfect time to invite TV and radio. Thinking about those elements where they're not just talking to you and you're just saying like, all of this stuff is happening, like you're giving them something concrete they can work with. And then press releases are good to put out there, but they really work best when they are timely and well targeted. So you're going straight to the reporters that you know are going to cover this topic, and it's related to something that's timely as well. That's when we've had the most success of actually having those quotes picked up and dropped into their story. That is, after all, the whole point of a press release. It's to get those quotes where they can just copy and paste it in there and fill some more inches in their story. So with that, any questions? Yes. Cool, congrats.
And I'm trying to build media relations. I've been reaching out mostly via email. I don't have any. I've been getting a lot of silence if it's not around a particular event, response. Like in terms of the let's meet for coffee. Here are the areas of expertise. Like, can I get to know? And these are beat reporters who are covering our stuff. Do you have any suggestions? Like, do I follow up? Do I try a different method with them?
Yeah.
What doesn't bug them?
Yeah, I would say be sure to keep following up. They've, especially with newsrooms, they're losing more and more staff all the time. It's we're all aware of what's going on there. They've got a ton of stories that they're juggling at any given time. I think it can be helpful to, even if you can't meet with them in person, I'm totally fine, like a 15-minute Zoom. I just want to make sure that I introduce you and a little bit about our organization. I think that would be beneficial, and don't give up. If you're able to give them a call, that's great. But I think, just showing that you're like, oh, I didn't forget about you. I may have gotten lost in your inbox, but you did not get lost in mine. So that's helpful. Yes.
Organization should have part of the basic branding kit. And also quick plug that Canva Pro is free for nonprofits.
That's a very important plug. Yes, it is. Canva Pro, canva.com. Yeah. So what's your question is, what should be in our branding kit? So here are there are professionals that make these big old communications kits, and they've got all these fancy, here's all our brand standards, 30 pages. It is pointless, is my opinion. Don't tell them I said that, but I'm like, oh, you put a lot of work for something that's a little much. You need to make sure you have all of your logos. When I look for a set of logo files, I want something that is vertical or square that's going to look good in my avatars or where I need to drop in something like that. I also, if you have what's awesome is if, and I always ask for this, both one of those logos and then some kind of horizontal logo as well, because that's what's going to be going on top of your letterhead or just anywhere where you need more of that space. You always have something, it's it's our logo horizontally looks really ridiculous in some of these situations. So anyway, make sure you have that. Make sure you have a version of your logo that is full color and also one that is all white with a transparent background. That's so you can, especially if you're using Canva, you can have an all color background or a dark background. You can still place your logo over the top and it will be visible. So I'm sorry, I'm dumping all of my oh, you asked about my brand kit, let me tell you. The next thing is make sure you have all of your organization's colors in the hex code. That is it's usually a hashtag or pound symbol, depending on which one you prefer, and 6 either letters or numbers next to it. That is the most common used color code that most graphic designers use, and you can use it very easily in Canva as well. And then the last part of my brand kit is always going to be some kind of guidance around font. Do you prefer sans font, which is pretty much anything that doesn't have like the little like horizontal lines in the top and bottom? Or, you know, I always think like the New York Times or Times New Roman is an example of a serif font. I usually use sans. It's a little more modern looking. And I'm just, maybe I'll have like, this is the font we typically use for like header pieces, and then like body text, we might have a different font or that's a similar font. And just, I don't know, pick two that you like that look nice next to your logo. And just have that written down in a document somewhere. Here's where you find all the logo files. Here's all of our colors, and here's your fonts, and you're pretty much good to go. Cool. Yes. Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. How recently would you say was the last time you saw like a local paper that was posting something that just pissed you off? Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say, I mean, you can join our friend up front here and trying to reach out and just kind of starting with like, first of all, finding the exactly who on that team you think you is going to be covering your area, and you, based on their past reporting, you feel like you could trust them with your story, like that they would do a serviceable job. I would keep it very targeted and like maybe think of like 1 or 2 publications where you want to make this happen, and just kind of focus on those 2, and just to kind of get the ball going. Being and having an open and honest conversation with them about like, here's what's happened in the past. This is this is a better representation of like the work that we're actually doing, and we are doing important work, and we want to get the word out there. And I want to be a valuable resource to you. But I also want to make sure that I share this open and honestly, and so that we have this understanding. And that's something where you want to be like, of course, beforehand, this is an off the record conversation just to kind of get things started. And then we can move more into background so you can get a better vibe of what we're doing. And also asking them, like, what are you looking for in your stories? So that when you're thinking about reaching out to them again, you already have an idea of like, they're looking for, you know, stories that are covering X, Y, and Z topic, and see how you can tie into that. Does that help? Yeah. Yes.
What I wanted to say was that I think a lot of folks, you know, that's just my opinion, and that's what I think at this point in the day and age we're at, the absolutes are gone. You know, when I even hear people say everything's equal, everything will never be equal, but it's equitable in the sense that we could, you know, try to balance things out, like, you know, or media, you know, saying something like this. Yeah, I think I saw the president say, oh yeah, you know, the pandemic's over, look at this area, nobody's wearing a mask, and somebody walk by with a mask in the background. So you're going to, and there's nothing wrong with that, because everybody's in their own space and how they feel about the situation. So I think the jargon and how we communicate with people and being real transparent about communicating, I think is really, really important. So I appreciate that. Number one, I couldn't write down everything there. I appreciate you saying on the background or the backdrop. I judge or make an assumption, and sometimes we can get into thinking that background means research means you got to be a college student. It doesn't mean. It just means make sure you have to factor the information before putting it out there, because someone's perception is, you know, their reality. And once you create something, like an organization as a monster, it doesn't matter. That will never go away. That with someone coming in and trying to sugarcoat it and change it, once they've been created as a monster or the likes of good, and then they never can do anything wrong and they are doing wrong, that can happen too. So I think we're gone with the, you know, absolute this way, absolute that way. I think we're trying to, you know, come in the middle and communicate in the jargon and using different language and using different methods. Be open to get feedback from others to help you with that. Don't always think like you know everything. And I think that's my other, and I'll end with that. That's my other issue is not everybody in the position that they're in has the right answer, is the right person for that position. So you have to do your due diligence also on the other recipient end to understand that process too. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, don't believe the hype is kind of over. And I think that's what people are especially saying, because there's some real things that have happened to people.
Yeah, no, and thank you for sharing that, because that brings up just a really good point about, like, if you are in a situation where you're communicating with someone, especially like, but specifically like with a reporter. I went to journalism school. I know that we're taught to be like as unbiased as possible. We're just the facts, like, you know, this like 1960s, you know, Watergate, like, it's just the facts. But if we're not real about like having our own biases and experiences and impacting reporting, if you're working with a reporter who's not willing to acknowledge that and willing to challenge their own perceptions in order to get a story right, then you're probably not working with a great reporter. I'll just be honest. Yeah, I think sir, I saw your hand first. Oh, there is no perfect answer. Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, so the question was length of an email blast. Your email list is a special unicorn, and I can't tell you what your audience will respond to every time. And in the age of newsletters, where people will like scroll real far down in a newsletter, it can vary. I've heard anything from like email experts that like if you're sending real quick on emails, if you're sending an email out, every single email should have one ask in it. You are asking people to take action. You want them to click to donate. You want them to click to read an article. You want them to click to share on social. Focus on the one ask, because as soon as you start putting unless you're doing a newsletter, if you're putting other things, you're going to lose them. And you want to have about like 100 to 200 words before that ask comes into play, typically. The rest of the text beyond that, let's say, you know, maybe 500 words, that seems kind of long. I certainly try to keep my emails under 500, and that's like a longer email. But the most important thing is that my ask is toward the top. I've got that big old button. I've got everything hyperlinked, and I've hyperlinked to it again as I continue down. So, you know, hopefully they'll click on it there if they didn't get it at the top. So that's kind of my general advice. The big thing though, is if you can kind of keep track of the analytics coming from your email list, like if you send a long email, did anybody get to that link toward the bottom, or did, you know, was it better when you sent one at the top? Any type of like A/B testing you can do in like MailChimp or something is awesome. You kind of got to feel out what your list responds to, because you might have the kind of list that's like, I love reading about what you guys are up to. Give me more. That happens sometimes. There are some that are like, no, just get to the point. And then I think you had your hand up.
And I know we're just about at time, but so really quickly, do you have any suggestions for how we approach say we're going to be part of a project that we know is going to be controversial and maybe want to get ahead of it, like either doing outreach with neighborhoods or with public officials or anything else, of how any like suggestions of how we approach those conversations or anything else as well.
Yeah, like so basically like trying to do neighborhood outreach, or like when something's kind of a sticky situation. Okay, so, or public officials or advocates, she said. So, well, the very first step that I would do is I would sit down with my team and we would write really strong talking points. Think about all the questions that you're going to get in that situation and how you're going to respond to them, and have a master document of here's our talking points for this topic. Here's the main points at the top. Like I'll do a section of like, here's just like our top lines. Here are the main when I'm getting to the point, I'm going to that section. And the next part is like maybe almost like an FAQs page. Like, you know, if we get this question, here's how we respond. If we get this question, here's how we respond. The methods of your outreach, it would depend on that specific situation. Like how you go about approaching folks in a neighborhood. Like, you know, does that mean like you try to do like a local event or be a part of a local event to help get the word out there and, you know, get ahead of the spin on what this project is? That might be something that makes sense depending on the project. But I think that the most important thing is that you're stopping and acknowledging that this is sticky and we need to all be on the same page on how we talk about it before we move forward. I hope that helps answer your question. I think we're just about out of time. So I want to say thank you all so much for coming and listening to me talk for a bit. And as a reminder, up here we have that handout that I mentioned, and also my business card. If you want to send me an email, I'm more than happy to answer any other questions we didn't get to. No.